Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Anna Maqbool with you at PTV World, and today's show we will be taking a look at some very important developments. One, of course, is in reference to something that we have discussed previously as well, the issue of the increase of terrorist attacks in Pakistan, and of course with regards to the regional security challenges that also exist, and how Pakistan needs to cope up with the Afghan Taliban regime, and of course in order to move forward in a way that the territory of Afghanistan is not used against any other soil, including of course Pakistan as well. In the recent times we've also seen this particular area being discussed in our partnership with the US as well, with the US talking about of course the fact that the Afghan Taliban regime need to ensure its commitment with regards to its territory not being used against any other soil, and then also emphasizing on the importance of the way that Pakistan has contributed to regional security. And now we also know that the US Secretary Antony Blinken and the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, had a telephonic exchange in which a number of issues, including the relationship with reference to Afghanistan and regional security, came under discussion. And the US-Pakistan partnership in reference to increased economic support for the country was also part of the agenda. And we know that both sides have reiterated the value that this relationship holds to them, and how they can move forward in terms of increased cooperation on both these fronts. The Foreign Minister also, of course, has recognized and thanked the US for its support, especially in terms of the IMF program, and then of course moving forward how the two partners can also align in terms of regional security. But in terms of what it actually means on ground, and how far can this partnership go, and how is it that Pakistan and the US will be able to move forward in a way and develop a mechanism that ensures the expectation that the world, including the US, has with the Afghan Taliban regime, and how Pakistan would be able to protect its own territory from the increase in terrorist activities from organizations such as the TTP. So we're going to be focusing on that in our first segment of the show today. Our next one is also going to take a look at the regional situation, especially in terms of what is going on in the neighborhood. And we know that there seems to be a plan going forward by the opposition to go ahead with a no confidence motion against the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and it seems that perhaps this is not something that may have a lot of chance. But when we talk about what has happened in Manipur, and the way that this has been something that the BJP has quite frankly ignored, perhaps this may be a way forward towards a discussion or a dialogue that can be held, and the government may be forced to at least recognize and discuss these issues. And this is something that previously also the BJP has undergone back in 2018 when a similar no confidence motion was also raised, which eventually of course failed, but it did bring up a lot of dialogue on various important issues, including ethnic violence. So we're going to be focusing on what is going on within India, and how these changing dynamics are going to impact the BJP, and of course the way that the political dynamics are going to evolve with the opposition. So that is going to be our focus of the discussion today. For this and more, as always, in our studios I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi, and after a very, very long time we've also been joined once again by a long-time friend, old partner at the debate, and a geopolitical analyst, Raja Faisal. Welcome back, Faisal, and it's good to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, sir.
We've also been joined by our guests online for our first segment with reference to the situation in terms of the national security concerns regarding Afghanistan by Stephan Jensen, who's an Afghan affairs expert. Thank you very much, Stephan, for joining us and being a part of the debate. And I'll start with you, Stephan. First of all, let me know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much.
All right. So, Stephan, when we talk about what is going on, especially in terms of the Afghan Taliban regime in Afghanistan, and particularly after the U.S. troop withdrawal, of course, from a Pakistan's perspective, it's extremely important that there is a protection for the people of the country, and that the spike in terrorist activities that we've seen is something that, because it is also linked with the Afghan Taliban regime, is a collaborative effort and is curbed and recognized, at least in the international arena. I want to understand, given the current scenario and the fact that right now there is an Afghan Taliban regime in Afghanistan, and the US troops have withdrawn, and the kind of situation that exists in terms of the lack of protection of Afghanistan's territory being used against any other country, including Pakistan. What do you think can be done from Pakistan and the US towards making sure that they in fact do meet their expectations? Do you think that this is something that countries like the US or Pakistan can achieve?
I think it's a very good question. I think the Doha deal and what was done on the assumption by the Americans that the Taliban would be a responsible partner. It turns out that's just not the case. The only of the promises they made during the Doha deal, they reneged on almost all of them. Obviously, Pakistan has its own very complicated relationship with the Afghan Taliban, with I think parts of the Pakistani military having supported Taliban for a long time and having been a very important partner to the Afghan Taliban. And I think what we're seeing now is that both the Americans post Doha and the Pakistani ISI are figuring out that actually the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, are not very reliable partners. I think one can hope that they will respond to pressure, cajoling, negotiations to become a more reliable partner for stability in the region. My prediction would be that because they are ideologically aligned with Turkic Taliban and the more than 20 other terrorist organizations that are now based in Afghanistan, any such commitments will be kabuki theater, and whether they are in the short term will say, okay, we're going to do X, Y, Z to lessen the pressure. You cannot get away from the fact that fundamentally the Afghan Taliban support the mission of the Tehrik Taliban, of the TDP, and they support the mission of the other organizations that are now being harbored in Afghanistan, despite the fact that they made promises to the United States that they would not allow Afghan soil to be used for attacks on foreign ground. What should be done? I mean,
yes, continue.
So I mean, what should be done? Of course, every avenue to bring pressure should be explored. There are lots of sanctions on the Taliban that are not being properly enforced, and the Taliban are still receiving lots of aid through. I mean, they're skimming off a very, very large portion of the humanitarian aid that are coming into the country, and in other ways, they're being treated while not having been officially recognized. They're being treated as a responsible partner. I think there's lots of leverage here to put additional pressure on the Taliban. But my worry is that we'll figure out sooner or later that it's not going to work, and the reality will come that regional stability is impossible as long as the Afghan Taliban remain in power. If you come to that realization, that creates some other much bigger questions, I think, for Pakistan and the United States, as well as the other regional countries.
Right, absolutely. And Faisal, I want to focus more also when we talk about the promises or expectations that have been there, or the commitments made by the Afghan Taliban regime. I understand that that's there, of course, and that may be so. But in terms of what we see and the fact that a lot of that has been largely ignored, we of course then move to whether or not there is going to be any use of these commitments or any way forward that actually can be ensured. And if not, then when we talk about the issues that can be raised, the Afghan Taliban regime also brings up the issue of recognition. And time and again, we've spoken about issues of recognition versus commitments, and none of them has actually happened. But that means that we're stuck in this current situation. And at the end of the day, Pakistan is bearing a lot of the cost that eventually is coming its way. So how exactly will our increased collaboration with the US or increased partnership can pave way towards actually at least protecting some of the damage that Pakistan has to bear?
Sana, that's a very good question, and here I would mention that to me, I think war in Afghanistan was over for US. War in Afghanistan for Afghan people, especially the Taliban, it was over. War in Afghanistan for the NATO forces, all of the countries that were involved in Afghanistan, the war is over for all of them. The only country that is still suffering from that war is Pakistan. And of course, Pakistan has time and again highlighted this, and let's highlight it once more, that we are the country that gave around 75,000 lives to it, and more than $220 billion we have lost in terms of our economy to this war of the 20 years still going on for Pakistan. Here I would like to mention that earlier Stephan, he rightly pointed out that of course Taliban, TTA and TTP, both of them, they are interlinked to each other. Of course they have long standing relationship, and in past of course TTP always stood with TTA against the coalition forces that were active within Afghanistan at that time. Right now, of course, they are still in touch. They are still in the relations within each other. Of course, they have exchange relations in terms of somebody is married to TTP, and from TTP somebody is married to TTA. So this is how they still lingering on that relationship. Most important thing to ponder about is Doha Accord. And of course here is where US becomes very important. Why I say this? Because US was part of that Doha Accord, and of course it was to ensure that whatever the accord is, in accordance to that accord, as Pakistan and all of the neighbors, they required the Taliban regime to focus on their internal security as well as external as well, so that their land is not being used for any of the neighboring countries. Sadly, Pakistan is still facing terrorism, and 99% of that terrorism is erupting and originating from two of the provinces of Afghanistan. We have and again we have mentioned Nangarhar and Kunnar province. There are two provinces, they need to be looked after by TTA. In that context, if they are failing to do that, I would suggest to the world as well as to the TTA that if they are feeling that they are failing to control them two provinces, then let the world handle them two provinces, because Pakistan is suffering and Pakistan can't bear it anymore. And of course Pakistan would do whatever is necessary to do to secure Pakistani citizens. And of course I think in that context this meeting between Secretary Blinken and Foreign Minister of Pakistan, it is important. And don't forget, very recently there was a meeting between the two chiefs from both sides. It is also important, and of course it is all related to the peace within Pakistan and the threats that originate from within Afghanistan.
Right. Farrukh, the development that we saw earlier between Antony Blinken and the Foreign Minister of Pakistan has come when we've seen previous developments as well, including the US CENTCOM chief meeting with the Chief of Army Staff, and previously then statements coming in from the top military establishment of Pakistan, and then coming in from the US as well, all talking towards, of course, this sort of cooperation that can possibly exist, and highlighting the role that Pakistan has to play and then the challenges that remain. And I want to know whether or not this points towards any growing momentum between the partnership of US and Pakistan that is perhaps a step much more significant than previously, and if so, what direction is it taking?
Right, and I mean, I'm grateful first of all for this question, because that is the actual trigger point that caused this discussion to take place. But before that, I wanted to welcome back our good friend. When you said that we are going to talk about one huge development, I think this is the biggest one that he's back, right? The second aspect regarding your professionalism, how effectively you change the context, so that I'm not going to talk about Afghan Taliban at all. But I'm just going to comment on something that Faisal just said, that war is over for Afghan people. Remember that Galtung has actually identified a very interesting kind of peace. One is positive peace between two countries or in any society. The other one is negative peace. That means that all the fault lines are there, and they can explode any time, and people keep on suffering, but there is absence of war. So I think that in that context, perhaps Afghanistan's war is over. Otherwise, I think for ordinary Afghan women, for Afghan children, it is not over. A war by Afghan Taliban is being waged on their own people every single day, especially today. They have actually ordered women to close down all beauty parlors. I think that the main grudge must be that no matter how much effort is put in, no beauty parlor can actually beautify Afghan Taliban. But perhaps because of that, a lot of women are going to actually lose their livelihoods, and because it is a war-torn country, their dead earners are already dead, so they are going to, suffer a lot. Having said that, I think that Secretary Blinken's interaction, telephonic interaction with our foreign minister was most welcome. I think there are three things that are important. One, Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, my humble submission is that there is no reset button. We have been actually focusing on this for quite some time. And I'm loath to the idea, Sana, that we don't have policy options. Whenever that happens, that is bad. In the past, I've seen many situations where we thought that we had policy options, but we did not. In Afghanistan, it seems that because there is no counterpoint, because there is no force to challenge Afghan Taliban, we don't have that kind of capacity to actually reset whatever is going on in Afghanistan. Faisal was talking about families that are connected. Of course, that is so. But right now, I think that TTA and TTP are sharing the same bedroom. And because of that, we keep on suffering, and that will continue because Afghan Taliban don't see kinetic operations against the civilians as anything that is bad, because that was their modus operandi also against their own people, and that's how they rose to power. But this interaction between Secretary Blinken and our foreign minister, it goes beyond Afghanistan. Pakistan's economy is also something where we need support, and I think they are also trying to help us as much as possible. Then there is another very interesting thing that has happened. Recently, you must have heard that Russia actually quit the Black Sea grain agreement or deal. After that, what has happened is that because that grain was going to feed a lot of suffering countries from Africa to Middle East, I think that now there is interest, and I must actually compliment our army chief also, our prime minister, other forces in the country that are focusing on our agricultural potential, and that will actually help create a kind of alternative to that deal as well. So I think that was something that was also discussed. Naturally, because both countries are democracies, now the talk is also about how Pakistan's election also take place in coming days. So these are the many things that were discussed. My problem with Afghanistan's situation is, and I have to compliment whosoever actually kept on proposing in the past that Afghan Taliban are going to become some kind of solution for Pakistan and Afghanistan also, because at that time also I kept on saying that they are going to create problem, and right now we need to think outside the box. Perhaps time has come to start asking ourselves, what do we gain out of this relationship? We don't gain anything. The only thing is perhaps someday there has to be a talk of a secular alternative to Afghan Taliban.
Right, and Stephen, there's perhaps something along similar lines when we talk about the way forward with the Afghan Taliban regime. Initially, when there was the US troop withdrawal, there was a lot of emphasis, of course, on issues such as women's rights or the kind of inclusivity that needs to be there in the formation of government, and then, of course, the protection of its territory against other soils. But it seems now that after so much time has passed, this sort of perhaps, unfortunately, has become a back burner issue, and there isn't a lot in terms of emphasizing or highlighting efforts that perhaps are needed from the Afghan Taliban regime, and it seems that the world has sort of accepted that this is what the default situation is, that there is an Afghan Taliban regime, and of course you don't recognize it, but it's there and it's going on, and the commitments are not being fulfilled. How is it that we move from this position where we let things as they are and go, and there is the rhetoric, there is the condemnations, or there are statements coming in, but what is the move beyond them in order to proceed in a way that the Afghan Taliban regime wants to move ahead with the kind of requirements that exist towards recognition? How do we make sure that that actually happens? Do you think that that is something that lacks the kind of cultural sensitivity that needs to be there, or understanding of the Afghan Taliban regime, or perhaps there needs to be more push in terms of consequences, or there is something that the collaborative efforts such as that of the US and Pakistan can bring about that can eventually ensure a change within Afghanistan, because that's what is required to ensure the rest?
I think since the Doha deal, or I mean, the Taliban's experience has been that there have been no consequences for breaking any promises ever. I think people forget that the original deal made in Doha was conditional. Withdrawal was conditional on progress being made in the negotiations between the Taliban and the Afghan government. And they were conditional on the Taliban adhering to a number of other promises, all of which they broke, except attacking American forces. So already at the point when the withdrawal was carried through by Biden, the US signaled very strongly that they were no longer interested in holding the Taliban to account. I think the question will become, how long will it take until the Americans realize, not just the Americans, but the wider international community, realize that pretending that Afghanistan doesn't exist is not a solution. Obviously, for Pakistan, that's not possible because it's right next door, and the Taliban that were now brought into power with a lot of help from some organizations in Pakistan are now creating a lot of trouble for Pakistan. But sort of fundamentally, the U.S. attitude to kind of letting everything go and hoping that a few carrots will make the Taliban change behavior, that has to change, because it's clearly not worked so far. The first result of that was the Taliban taking over. That was a result of not holding into account to their promises. Going forward, I think there is lots of more pressure that can be put on the Taliban. They are a much weaker organization, a much weaker state than they pretend to be. They're much better storytellers than they are administrators. Afghanistan, I mean, right now, obviously, the will to have another armed resistance is hampered by the fact that people are very, very tired of not 20 years of war, but 40 years of war. At the same time, the Taliban seem to be doing everything they can to make the status quo even worse than resisting. The question becomes whether if the continued presence of the Afghan Taliban in government in Kabul is not tolerable to Pakistan, what then becomes Pakistan's attitude to the Afghan opposition, the secular opposition, as was mentioned earlier? Will they get the same safe haven that the Taliban once got? And if so, what will be the consequence?
Yes,
I think.
Stephen, if you can allow me, I just want to jump in because there is something very important which I think needs to be highlighted here as well, and I just wanted you to, of course, ponder upon that as well, and we would require what you say about it. Of course, we know that in past, since Ajit Doval took the office in India, we talk about National Security Advisor of India, Ajit Doval. Back in 2016, he boasted about a doctrine which was introduced by India. It's called defensive offense, which was carried out against Pakistan from within Afghanistan and from within Iran, penetration on the western front of Pakistan to create a chaos which we saw in recent past, and of course we have been bearing the fruits of it till now. Just wanted to know, whatever he said in Shastra University in 2016, is it still going on? Because if we look at the ground realities, normally it is considered as if once a country's regime gets changed, like we have seen in Afghanistan, that regime has changed. Normally we believe that of course all of the clandestine kind of activities would go would minimize or would go zero. But right now, of course, we know that last year in July, one of a very important consulates which used to be for India, it got reopened, and that's in Jalalabad. And of course I'm talking about the two very important provinces, Nangarhar and Kunnar province. Both of them, they are neighboring and bordering with Pakistan. Can we say that defensive offense of India is still going on at its full swing? Number one. And number two, if so, how can US help Pakistan to counter it?
I don't think India is behind the Tehrik-e-Taliban's attacks in Pakistan. I really don't. I think the bigger question for Pakistan is that for a very, very long time, the United States has been an extremely loyal ally of Pakistan, and that's a legacy of the Cold War. The question, I think, is what's in the future when we see the United States now pivoting much more towards a close relationship with India, which was impossible 30 years ago because of India's close relationship with the Soviet Union, and then it takes a long time for that to shift. But I think you can have a sort of a hardline approach between Pakistan and India, or you can very, very slowly and this is a difficult topic that I'm not the right person to talk about, but I think the only way you get lasting peace is some kind of rapprochement between India and Pakistan, and that will become a much more greater priority for Pakistan when the United States as an ally is also an ally of India and not just an ally of Pakistan.
Right, and thank you very much, Stephen, because we'd like to explore that further, but thank you for joining us and being a part of the debate as well and joining us in the discussion. And Farrukh, when we talk about all of these issues, we've discussed before also how the dynamic between US and India is going to impact our relationship with the US. But I want to understand, especially in terms of counterterrorism efforts, what sort of an approach can be possibly taken between the US and Pakistan, when there's of course also the relationship that's of importance to the US with India, and whether or not there can be any sort of aspect from this relationship that can counter impact or negatively affect the collaboration on counterterrorism with Pakistan.
Right. Sana, I think that if Pakistan and India could work together, there's always a possibility, because terrorism in any case affects all the countries in that region, right? But that is perhaps not going to happen, because the Shastra University speech that my brother was mentioning, actually that was given slightly before Narendra Modi took over. It was a kind of pledge or kind of marketing of the BJP's point of view, and that defensive offense in that speech, Ajit Doval actually said that Pakistan keeps on saying that it is the vanguard between democracy and Taliban. So, and if something happens to Pakistan, Taliban going to run over other countries. So let me say it very clearly that India and Pakistan are not friends. Pakistan is not India's friend, and Afghan Taliban are not actually our enemies. So we are very popular in Afghanistan. let Pakistan, let Taliban handle Pakistan. Once whosoever actually remains, we are going to actually deal with them, right? This was more or less the same subtext that I was actually quoting the other day also, and that speech, by the way, has been taken down from YouTube channel. It is on Daily Motion right now, and I have a personal copy, so I can give you that copy as well. But having said that, my concern is not merely the US-India relations, it is not US-Pakistan relations, but it is also how the US actually managed its drawdown or withdrawal from Afghanistan. For example, right now, when our soldiers actually confront Afghan Taliban, and there are moments, especially regarding the border fencing, that they come eyeball to eyeball. At that time, what happens? The Afghan Taliban have better equipment than Pakistani soldiers. Why? Because when the US was withdrawing, it did not destroy all the hardware or gear that was there, or did not take it along. So now Afghan Taliban have more or better equipment, and that equipment, by the way, is handed over kind of to the people who kept on killing American soldiers. And Pakistan, if Pakistan goes to procure the same weaponry from the US, there will be congressional debates, and eventually there will be it will be very difficult to procure that is the very same gear. So now the question is, who is being rewarded? The people who kill you or people who die for you, right? And this is a question that should keep on pinching the conscience of the Western commentators, because somehow they keep on inhaling the propaganda that emanates from India. And of course, pundits, the US state knows how much sacrifices Pakistan has done for them, right? Despite that, what is happening now, I don't think at this moment America has any leverage in Afghanistan, because they actually withdrew after empowering the people they actually withdrawing from, right? On the other side, yesterday I was reading a column, a beautiful column by Maliha Lodi Sahib, our ambassador former ambassador to the UN. And what frightens me, Sanam, is that after pointing out all the ridiculous contradictions of the situation, in the end, when I look at what is the proposed solution, there's none.
Yeah.
Why? There's one reason. Because we have never thought out of the box when it comes to Afghanistan. Where is the democratic opposition to Afghan Taliban? Why is it that they, when they were actually saying that they are going to stay in Mazar Sharif or elsewhere, our people actually kept on celebrating their departure or their fleeing.
Right.
Right now, we need some kind of reset button in Afghanistan, but this is the problem. The people who were ruling during PTI's time and they were making policy, they actually wanted only one-party system everywhere, in India, in Pakistan, and in Afghanistan. And because of that, right now, my state, despite having sacrificed so much, even today our soldiers are sacrificing, we haven't been able to get the kind of leverage that was needed to survive in that region. So there has to be somebody who has to be held accountable. And now somebody has to realize that people who say that Afghan Taliban are not your friends and there should be any secular alternative, they are not your enemies, they are actually thinking for you.
Right, absolutely. And of course, there is a need to move in that direction and try and think about different ways that can be, the Afghan Taliban regime can be dealt with and how we move forward instead of being stuck in a single situation. But speaking of India, we're also going to be moving on to our next segment where we're going to focus on the internal political dynamics of the country and speak about what the opposition plans to do next in terms of launching a no confidence motion against the Prime Minister of India. Let's take a look at more details in this package and then we'll continue the discussion.
26 opposition political parties in India have formed an alliance called Indian National Developmental Inclusive Alliance, which is meant to move a no-confidence motion against the extremist Hindu government of BJP led by Narendra Modi. For the past 2 weeks, opposition parties have been demanding that Modi should hold a debate in the lower house of Indian Parliament called Lok Sabha on the ongoing civil war in Manipur. but Modi-led government has been reluctant to discuss the deadly Manipur riots in Indian Parliament using various pretexts. On Monday, Modi government terminated the parliament session after 50 members of Rajya Sabha presented a resolution against the Manipur civil war. Opposition leaders sit in with Gandhi's statue outside the parliament on the unconstitutional termination of the session has continued to put pressure on the Modi government, which has also suspended the membership of Aam Aadmi Party leader Sanjay Singh. Opposition leader Mallikarjun Kharge emphasized that Indian government should think of the country beyond Modi's personal fortune. Both the European Union and US State Department have described the gruesome incidents of rape against women in Manipur as extremely alarming. This comes in the backdrop of spread of videos on social media showing bestial acts of parading two Kuki tribal women naked by Meitei Hindu mob in Manipur. Women were gang raped by some members of the mob later on. Such heinous acts depict the reality of extremist Hindu government in power in India led by Narendra Modi. Despite the Manipur being in crisis since first week of May, Narendra Modi maintained a criminal silence till the spread of videos on social media recently. BJP Chief Minister of Manipur Biren Singh has acquiesced in the mass killing of Christian Kuki tribal people at the hands of majority Hindu Meitei mob. It is high time that the world community, especially the Western governments, start condemning Modi government for unleashing terror on all minorities in India, be they Muslims, Christians, Sikhs or Dalits. Alliance called India or Indian National Developmental Inclusive Alliance is an effort by 26 opposition political parties to change the course of secular India, which has become a symbol of majoritarian extremism through massacres of minorities. Raza Khan, PTV World.
And as you can see in that report as well, there are of course numerous concerns that need to be raised, especially in terms of the kind of ethnic violence that the country has seen. And Manipur is just one, of course, of such examples that continue within India. And there's, of course, a lot that the world's attention needs to be directed to. But however, as we see, there still is increased momentum with India's partnerships with important allies, including the United States as well. And there isn't much condemnation on what is needed from, of course, the international partners in terms of what is going on inside India. Faisal, I want to understand that the alliance that is now being formed, called India, is planning to move ahead with a no confidence motion. And I want to understand, given the current scenario, how successful they're going to be, because a lot of the reports say that perhaps the real motivation is not the result of the no confidence motion. It's actually to bring about a force that moves in a direction that the Prime Minister has no other option but to talk about and address the issues in Manipur. But do you think that will the alliance have even that sort of power, where at least this current scenario is going to be recognized or dealt with by the BJP?
Sana, that's a very good question, and I think as long as in the obviously Parliament they can bring the issue to talk about, and of course there will be speeches we will be seeing in coming days. I think the main aspect of it, it's all about bringing the issue of Manipur in the Parliament, so that everyone can make speeches, highlight the Manipur issue, which has been neglected since almost 5 months now. Nobody was talking about it, and of course carnage was going on in Manipur, and we have seen the footages coming out of there. Till now nobody knows how many people have died there, number one, and number two, till now nobody knows how many women they were raped or gang raped in obviously Manipur, because one thing is for sure, Meitei tribe, which which happens to be aligned with BJP, the ruling party, and of course the CM also hails from within the Meitei tribe, because it's the predominantly majority tribe of Manipur. But two of other tribes, Kuki tribe and Naga tribe. Naga, not that carnage, it hasn't seen it, but if we talk about the Kuki tribe is the main victim of it. Reason being, predominantly it's a Christian tribe. Majority of the Kukis, they are Christians. First of all, their churches, their prayer places, they were burnt, they were brought to ground. And if we talk about their houses, obviously right now majority of them, they are homeless, because that carnage carried on for almost 3 to 4 months. There was no internet service, there was no calling service, so that people outside can know what was going on inside. The problem is still there. The problem is still there, and now when we're talking about it, that's when the other leaders, the opposition leaders, they have started getting in there to figure out what kind of carnage we're talking about. And that is why they have brought this issue in the parliament, so that it can be highlighted everywhere. And by the way, let me tell you why it has suddenly erupted from within Manipur, and nobody was talking about it before. I think let me mention here that the veterans of India, they are the ones who have highlighted it, and they are the ones who intervened so that the government can highlight it at a larger scale. Why? Because two women we are talking about, the footage that came out, they were paraded in Manipur naked by the Methi tribe, and of course them two women, they were from within the Kuki tribe. One of the girl was 21-year-old, the woman, she was 43-year-old. The 43-year-old woman, she happened to be wife of a war veteran. The war veteran I'm talking about, he actually fought against Pakistan in the Kargil war, and he got retired as an JCO, Junior Commissioned Officer, and he happens to be a Christian from the Kuki tribe as well. And him being the victim of this carnage, that's when it really mattered. Before this, how many Kuki women they got raped? Before this, how many Kuki women, men, kids got killed? Nobody knows, and nobody bothered for 3 months. And now, just because this, I'm not downplaying this incident. This incident is as evil as any of the other incidents would be. But I'm just saying it, now it gets promoted and it gets highlighted, but before everyone was quiet in India.
Right.
Somehow I believe in today's India, element of good and evil is in every society. But in today's India, sadly speaking, the good I always expected from any nation, I'm not seeing it coming out from India.
Right.
Whereas evil is being displayed and highlighted everywhere in India.
Right, but the question remains in terms of what is going to be achieved. And I want to understand, Farrukh, first what the alliance India is going to achieve, especially in terms of even bringing about this debate in the parliament. I understand that this discussion is important, or highlighting certain issues is important, but we have seen that in previous circumstances as well, that many things that even were highlighted, perhaps even outside of India, really did not make a difference to the victims. And secondly, when we talk about instances such as what Faisal was describing, is it that there is a lot of emphasis on the fact that this is going on, or that this is being highlighted as why now people are responding to it? Or is it because this line, unfortunately, needs to be crossed before there is any attention?
All right, Sanam. I think that, remember that episode that I mentioned where one person from BJP actually went and urinated on a lower caste man, right, who was merely sitting there, right? To the world, all these shock and awe pictures or details might be something new. We are actually dealing with it for 9 years. And yours truly, and of course, you and Faisal also have been very, regularly and constantly highlighting the kind of changes that are happening in India. And this is the modus operandi of BJP's politics. Remember that before Narendra Modi, actually rose to prominence because of what happened in Gujarat, state of Gujarat, Indian state of Gujarat, where 2,000 Muslims were killed in broad daylight, right? Before that, he was not an elected CM of Gujarat. He was appointed CM because the previous one had quit. But because that even happened, because of this shock and awe, Babri Mosque and then this. After that, Modi immediately rose to prominence, and then somehow BJP normalized it, and now the entire India has normalized the phenomenon called Narendra Modi. So after that, that actually creates a kind of example for others to emulate. If you want to do something, if you want to become a national leader, all you have to do is commit a crime so big that it becomes statecraft, right? And this is exactly what has been happening, right? You want me to conclude?
Yes.
Okay. So there you have it. I don't think anything is going to change, and India, this new conglomeration of opposition parties, I don't think it can do much.
Okay.
All they can do is force Modi to come to floor of house, and that is all. I don't think that in coming days it is going to create any kind of stir inside India. India is whatever it is. I have actually normalized it, and I might be a monster, but I've come to, made peace with this reality that India is gone.
Right. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate. That's all that we have from the show. We'll see you tomorrow.